Greetings, metaphysicians. This is episode 146, Incarnational Priority. What's yours? And that's kind of what this episode is about. We even do an exercise to attempt to ascertain what that might be for you. So, enjoy the episode.
You're listening to Let's Get Metaphysical. This podcast explores the spiritual and metaphysical world through the experiences and opinions of the host and those interviewed. It should not necessarily be seen as direct endorsement or personal advice to our listeners. We encourage you to use your own discernment, judgment, and intuition regarding anything you learn from this show.
Let's get meta.
Welcome to the Let's Get Metaphysical podcast. I'm your host, Renata Maniaci. Here to remind you that you are a spiritual being having a temporary human experience here on lovely planet Earth. This is season 7, Heaven on Earth, and this is episode 146, Incarnational Priority. That's what we're talking about today. What is your incarnational priority? Why are you here? What are you here to do? Now, you could have several of these, and they could just be divine boxes that you were set up to tick off at certain points along the path. But what are those? Have you ever thought of what those might be? Do you have any awareness that you have accomplished one of these incarnational priorities? Do you know that there was absolutely something that you needed to do, or someone you needed to meet, or something you needed to say, or somewhere you needed to be at a certain time and place? Let's continue to dive into this, shall we? Are you ready? Let's get meta. Masters and angels, I request your guidance, presence, and support through this episode. Please help these words to be useful to all listeners on their evolutionary journey. Let me know the truth, speak the truth, become the truth, and be the truth. And please let this episode reach whoever needs to hear it. Thank you with gratitude and full faith. Bless creation. So I just wanted to share how this topic came up. I received an email from my spiritual community, and this was the headline, Incarnational Priority. And then that same day, or maybe it was the next day, I was doing a project, and that phrase came through again as something that I needed to record for one of the things that we're doing or did for this spring tour. And I don't know the last time I mentioned this, but we are in the spring tour, the Divine Grace Tour of my teacher, Master John Douglas. We started that a few days ago, and we'll be continuing with several events over the next 2 months, if that's something you're interested in. I think I did mention this on the last episode. Check out globalcma.org if you are interested in listening to any of those events. They are all available remotely. But this wasn't meant to be a plug for that necessarily. These words came through twice over a period of 24 hours, and they struck me. And I thought, maybe they'll strike you too. Let's have an episode about this. And this is a topic that probably people who are atheists or believe that everything that's happening is random and by chance, and believe that this is a YOLO situation where you only live once, these words probably won't spark anything for those people. But for those of you who have been listening into this show, you're probably someone who understands on some level that there is a higher divine intelligence organizing this creation. There is some form of supreme being or God or great spirit, however you characterize that. And you do in fact have some sense, some semblance, some remembrance that this isn't all random. This isn't all chaos. Your life is not chaos. There is an order. And if there is an order, there could be much more than that. One of those big existential questions is always, what is my purpose? This is essentially an episode about that. But I loved this framing of an incarnational priority or priorities. They're similar. They're maybe not the exact same thing. Your purpose or purposes maybe are things that you need to achieve, check off, things that need to be done or happen or occur before you can move on to the next level, the next stage of your incarnation. Your incarnational priority is, what are you choosing or needing to put energy into this time round, this lifetime, this incarnation? And this episode is kind of a check-in. Are you doing that? Step one, do you know what that is? Do you know what your incarnational priority or priorities are? And step two, are you allowing them to take priority in your life? And these are all going to be different for everyone. I would hazard a guess that every one of us may have a very different incarnational priority. And also that those priorities could possibly shift over time as we evolve and grow in our consciousness. That could be true. But maybe it's not like that. Maybe the incarnational priority that you were born with is still that same incarnational priority. And what's the difference between the priorities that we have based on our personalities, egos, and human constructs, our own human wants, needs, and desires? And what's the difference between that and what our souls, that eternal part of ourselves that lives beyond just this incarnation, what priorities does the soul hold for this journey, this present lifetime, this current situation and body you find yourself in at this time? Those are probably different. Who knows? Maybe you are advanced and develop enough that those two things are merged for you. You have tamed your ego, personalities, and human constructs, needs, and desires enough to prioritize your soul's reason for being here on this planet at this time. That could be too, and that is wonderful. We're going to do an exercise a bit later just to see what comes to mind, what drops in when you ponder this question. And so to give you some examples What am I talking about here? Is your priority in this life to create children? Is your priority to write a book, to start a business, to find a partner, to be a kind person, to compete in an Ironman, to scale the tallest mountain, to travel to every continent, to serve God as best you can, to build a house, to have enough money to send your kids to college. I think that this world often is so busy and we're so overloaded with human things that we need to do to survive day to day. Making enough money to keep a roof over our head, to have enough food, to put gas in your vehicle, etc. That these questions take a back seat, maybe aren't pondered, but part of my incarnational priority in this life, at least right now, is to help to remind people that they are eternal spiritual beings having a temporary human experience here on lovely, complicated, sometimes chaotic planet Earth. And so I think for me, I've found that the more we can remember something like that, the easier it is to see all these other things as secondary and less pressing in any given moment than these bigger concepts of, oh yeah, this is temporary. And if this is temporary and if my soul lives on after this, why am I here? What am I doing here? What do I need to accomplish while I'm here? Well, Earth life has me so distracted with paying my taxes and putting gas in my car and making sure my family's okay and taking care of my sick relatives. Aside from all of those human things, why actually am I here? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And am I prioritizing what I am meant to be prioritizing? Am I ticking those boxes that I helped set up prior to incarnating into this current lifetime? That blueprint, that path, that plan, that syllabus almost, that grocery list of things that I needed to do or collect or people I needed to meet and help and change. And have I done the evolution, the evolving that I've needed to do? Am I doing that? And so let's just step in here and do a little exercise. Sometimes we do exercises on this. Sometimes I just leave it all for bonus content, which I will have for this episode. So I'll come back to that later. But whether you are just sitting and listening to this, but I think most people are doing something when they're listening to podcasts. I certainly am. Lots of times I'm driving or cleaning or, doing something when I'm listening to podcasts. You can be too. That's fine. Don't close your eyes if you're driving. But let's just take a moment here and we're going to ask, and you'll ask in your own way, in your own voice, in your head, out loud, whatever you want. What is my incarnational priority? And then we're going to be silent for a minute. So we're not doing this necessarily yet because I just want to say something before we go into this. Many of you, I can tell, I can feel, are already very good at communicating with your guides and knowing the difference between your own mind and brain and ego and personality and your own voice in your mind that comes in to answer things, your own thoughts, and not that, and your soul or your divine guidance or your angelic companions coming in, etc. Many of you already know the difference between those voices. But for those of you who are still working on that, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this. We're going to say this. And the first things that come in may very well be your brain. And you can take note of what your brain says. You can take note of whatever comes in right away that your brain says. But then you're going to stay open a few more beats. We might be silent on this show for a minute or more to allow this space. It's okay to allow space when we're doing an exercise. And you're just going to be open and in a receptive mode to allow something other than your brain to drop in a knowing, to drop in a thought, to drop in a kernel of divine answers. So we're going to do that, okay? Here we go. What, and you ask this in your own way, what is my incarnational priority? And I'm going to do this with you now. So I'm going to come back in now. And hopefully, maybe you're still getting these answers, these knowings. I trust that some of you had those intuitive, soul-felt, guided knowings, and some of you probably had some brain and thought stuff drop through at first, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I hope that you held in there, open and receptive, non-judgmental of yourself, and allowed other higher divine wisdom and guidance to come through. And as I did this exercise, it was interesting because the first thing I got, I'll share with you, very happy to share, is what I had said before, in a different way, that part of my incarnational priority is to help folks remember that they are divine, using a variety of different tools, we can say, or mediums. This podcast is one medium that I'm currently using to help people remember that they are more than human and that they had a long, resume, maybe, before this lifetime, and they will continue their galaxial and universal resume after this lifetime has completed. That is one of my incarnational priorities, and it could shift. It will shift, actually, is what they said. Right now it's a podcast and a few other things that I do outside of the podcast, and later it could be something else. But as I listened, a few other things dropped in, which leads me to hypothesize that these incarnational priorities may look more big picture than something very small and specific. So maybe you got something like, I needed to graduate from this specific school, or I'm here to, XYZ. It's hard to come up with other people's examples. But if you got something a bit bigger picture, that may be an indication that that is a true incarnational priority for you. I also got, as I listened, what I heard was to attain the highest level of consciousness that I can, being in a body. Just an interesting way to put it, but it makes sense because once we're out of body, presumably we have more access to higher levels of consciousness, higher states of consciousness that aren't inaccessible from being in a body. So that made sense. So the highest level of consciousness that you can attain being within a body, that was interesting. And also I also heard to become the most powerful version of myself that I am able to while being embodied. So a lot of these have to do with this specific incarnation because they're talking about being embodied. And I happen to, interestingly, have a few different memories of lifetimes where I was not in a body. So it seems like these bodies have their limits in terms of consciousness and capability and ability, but that those shouldn't hold us back from being able to understand our incarnational priority or priorities and recognize those and move towards those if we have stagnated or not even become aware of what those are, or have been actively going in an opposite direction. This is kind of a gentle reminder to look into this. What are you supposed to be prioritizing right now, and are you doing it? Now, you may have gotten very different things than me. We all have very different lives, none of them better or worse than others, none of them higher or lower. We all came here with different priorities and purposes. And so you may have gotten, something like raising your kids in the very kindest way that you possibly can, or creating that organization that you've been working on or seeing in your dreams or getting downloads about, or XYZ. Or maybe it's something larger or seemingly smaller than any of these things. I would love to hear what you got, actually. I would absolutely love to hear some of the things that came in while we did this exercise. And maybe you'll do this exercise later when you're not driving or not cleaning your house or, washing your dishes or whatever you're doing right now. And you can just give yourself that space to listen. And you know that I'm always encouraging you to foster that relationship between not only yourself and your high self and soul, but also your divine companions who are literally at the ready to help you and to give you guidance and provide support for you should you ask. And asking is important, as I've talked about at length. So I won't go into that at the moment. But just using this moment, this episode, as a friendly reminder that your presence on this planet is bigger then most of the day-to-day puttering around that we do as part of our lives and culture and survival on this planet. And are you aware of what your incarnation is for? I have a sense that some of you are very aware of what your incarnational priorities are, and some of you have never thought about it before. Just like I really hadn't thought about it until I heard this phrase a few days ago. But since it keeps cropping up, I figure it's important to talk about on the show. So maybe give it some more thought. And if you heard something and felt something or knew something or had that knowing or given anything or will be given something once you take a moment of silence later today or tomorrow, and you realize, oh wow, that's really not, I haven't really been focusing on that. I haven't really been putting energy towards that. I haven't been prioritizing that. Whatever they say, whatever it is, this might be that moment to reevaluate and maybe put some energy into these things that either your soul or high self dropped in for you while asking this question, or your divine guidance and spiritual companions have dropped in for you. Because I don't think any of us want to get to the end of this incarnation, whatever that is, whenever that is, which I believe is probably predetermined for everyone. That might be controversial, but I don't know. My experience is your death, this is a whole nother episode, but your human death seems to be predetermined, even if it happens in quote unquote accident form or any other form. Anyways, when we leave the body, I feel my experience with death has been that fairly quickly with other people's deaths and hearing about them is that you pretty quickly get shown, like all the things that you were meant to do and all the things that you did in your lifetime. And probably all of us would feel really good if we actually ticked the boxes we were supposed to tick and prioritized what we were supposed to prioritize. What or who, or in service to what or who. And yeah. So here's your friendly reminder to ponder your incarnational priority. What is that for you? Are you putting energy towards this? Do you need to change anything? Do you need to ask your spiritual companions for help in becoming aware of what these are and then putting those in motion as something that is important to you? So there you go. We will have bonus content for this episode. I have a clearing. We will clear anything we can that maybe is getting in the way of us understanding, becoming aware of, and going for putting energy towards our incarnational priorities in this lifetime. So you can find that at patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Anyone who is listening, you can now become a free member of my little online community. You can become a patron angel at patreon.com/letsgetmeta, but you can sign up for free, which, I don't have much going on for that tier, but you'll be able to see some of the stuff that is going on. You'll be able to comment on certain things, and I would love to hear about anyone who wants to share what their incarnational priority or priorities are in this lifetime. I think that would be fascinating. So I'm going to leave it there for today. As always, thank you so much for listening. Stay positive, stay safe, and stay meta.
The Let's Get Metaphysical podcast is an Up, and Awaken production and is produced and hosted by Renata Maniaci. Our intention is to raise the vibration of the planet by sharing, validating, and normalizing spiritual and metaphysical experiences. If you are ready to raise your vibration, you might enjoy our free Let's Get Meta Master Clearing. To receive the Master Clearing or to learn more about the podcast, visit letsgetmeta.com. The Let's Get Meta podcast is inspired by angels and supported by angels. If you would like to be a patron angel to the podcast, visit patreon.com/letsgetmeta. Thank you for listening. Stay meta.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.
Let's get meta.
Metaphysical.